Good evening, everyone. My name is Vanessa Akins, and I am a Special Program Management Coordinator in the Prince George's County Planning Department. On behalf of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, Prince George's County Planning Department, we welcome you to the Qualified Data Center Central Community Meeting. This is your meeting, where we want to hear your thoughts, receive your input, and ask that you be fully engaged and be involved in the discussion with your fellow residents at the table. Now I have the opportunity to introduce James Hunt, who is our Deputy Director, followed by Gensler Consulting Group, who will facilitate the discussion.
All right, thank you, Vanessa. And this is wonderful to come out here and to see so many people out here with us today, and interested to hear more about this great topic of data centers. To kind of start everything off here, I want to be very clear in setting the stage. Okay, the intent here is to get feedback from the public on what they see and what they know about data centers, and also how they anticipate the impacts to be on their community and what they actually want to see when it comes to those there within Prince George's County. Now, I'll be very clear, we don't have anything in the pipeline when it comes to this. That's not what this meeting is about. This meeting is about an opportunity to get information from the community on how they want their lawmakers to look at data centers and the policies around data centers in order to implement something effective for the community, what works for the community. So it's basically getting back to the community first and putting the community first, and then discussing policy and the law itself and how to implement those laws. So it's a better way of looking at things and getting that feedback from the community to set things up moving forward. Understanding that there are certain situations here within Prince George's County. I know, for example, what I've heard, we had the last meeting back last week on last Thursday, we were really talking about, a lot of the community members were talking about the Landover Mall site, right? Some people may be aware that they had an approval that did go in for that site. However, just to kind of clarify, I want to kind of set the record straight on that one. Yes, there was an approval through the prior zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations that did allow for a data center to go there, and kind of let you all know kind of the process behind what's taking place with data centers, the process behind them, and everything moving forward. When it comes to that particular location, to be very clear, under the prior zoning ordinance, it did allow for a qualified data center to go at the Landover Mall site. And they went through the preliminary plan of subdivision process, which I'll go into a little bit later, and they did receive their approval, which is a public hearing process. They did receive their approval there, and then the next stage, of course, after that would have been straight to permitting. We did hear a lot from citizens about their concerns when it comes to the process itself, and that's another reason why we're here today. We want to get more information from you and what you want to see. We do realize that in other jurisdictions, such as the ones across the river here in Northern Virginia, that there are some processes that do not work, and it will not work for Prince George's County. So what does work for Prince George's County? So we want to know what that is from you all tonight. So we have various tables up here, these 3 different groups that we have set up to hear that feedback from you all as it relates to the process. So you want me to go through the agenda as well? Just kind of go next page, okay. Go through here, all right. So as you can see on the agenda tonight, this is what we're really running through. So the first 15 minutes is really trying to get, you have this posters and everything on the back and up front to get some of the feedback that you all have. We want to get that information from you. As it relates to the process itself and that feedback, not only from what's on the boards that you've seen, but also what you're going to provide on the table on the posters, we're going to take that information and provide it back to what we call the data center, Qualified Data Center Task Force. And I can give you a little background on that task force. That task force was formed earlier this year, back in the spring actually, from the county council. And the intent, of course, just like we're doing out here today, is to get more information about data centers so we can, so the county council members can make qualified, really good decisions when it comes to policy on data centers. So we're sitting here today to get that information from you. In addition to that, that data center task force, they meet on a monthly basis. I think it's every second Wednesday of the month at our Largo headquarters. And if you all want to know that address, I'll be happy to give it to you because it's open to the public. So it's 1616 McCormick Drive in Largo, if you all are familiar, the old UMGC building, or Raytheon building, if some of you are familiar as well. But any member of the public's available to come out, you can come out. It's between 11 and 1 in the Largo headquarters building, so feel free to come out as well. We do have it recorded, so it's all online through our website, which I'll go through a little bit later towards the end. I think it's at the end of the presentation. I believe we have that website up. So you'll be able to see that website. You can go on and see the prior meetings that have taken place so far. Truly, those data center task force meetings are to get information to the task force about facts, okay? We really want to talk about facts. We know there's a lot of assumptions that are out there, but what are the facts out there? And also, what does the community say about that? So they've got the facts aspect, but we want to hear from you all, which feeds into the policy decisions that are taking place as part of the process. So from 6:15 to 6:35, we're going to have, of course, we're doing the welcome message and everything right now. And I'm going to go through a few points of interest, or we'll go through the few points of interest on the data centers moving forward. Then we'll go into a little bit later on the different roundtables. We realized from last week that we had one where the public was there in the meetings and we were trying to move people, actually had the folks who were facilitating moving around. So now we want you all to kind of stay where you are and we'll move people around for different topics. So don't worry about that. We're going to help you and kind of work through that with you. And then last but not least, we'll have some closing and next steps. And as we said on the last slide, there are a total of 3 community meetings that are out there. There was one, of course, last week, which was in the northern part of the county at the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission's Parks and Recreation Auditorium up in Riverdale. Of course, this week is the one in the central part of the county. And then further on Saturday morning from 10 to noon, you're more than welcome to come out there as well to get more information about it too. It's the same information we're going to be providing, it's just getting more information from the public on what they want to see. So it's not just one part of the county we want to hear from, we want to hear from all parts of the county. So that's why we've kind of spread it out throughout the county to get all that feedback coming forward. That said, I do want to kind of stop and see if there's any folks from the county executive's office or anyone from the county council members' offices that are here. Recognize them? All right. I believe our chairman of the planning board, Mr. Darrell Barnes, he'll be here a little bit later. So when he gets here, I'm gonna stop and give him an opportunity to speak as well because he is very interested in this topic. It's a very important topic. So that said, I think I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, James. I'm Elaine Asal. I'm part of the Gensler team that's helping to facilitate these meetings and do this study, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. As James said, the task force was established in April of this year to address the impact of data centers on the following: existing and future local energy demands, potential impact to county ratepayers and taxpayers, environmental impact and mitigation strategies, and impact to quality of life factors. The task force has been meeting monthly, as James was mentioning, in a live broadcast, and those recorded meetings are available on the website. They are open to participation, so we do have some information here. I think James was just sharing some of it, so the dates are up here on the screen. There's also a really great website that we might direct you to. We put a QR code, so hopefully that translates with the resolution. But it has a lot of really good information, and again, the past recordings. And we've had the opportunity to go to a couple of these meetings, and I think the content is really helpful, it's really informative, so I would highly encourage those interested to take a look and take a listen. So Gensler was brought in collaboration with the Prince George's County Planning Department on this engagement effort. And we really want to kind of talk through what the intention of these meetings. I think James set it up really perfectly, that our intention is to hear what your current concerns are. We want to understand public perception and questions, and we want to identify potential opportunities related to data center development in the county. We do have our team is working to assess and unpack these potential impacts. We're developing a report that we'll be sharing in September. So as James was mentioning, as part of these monthly meetings, all the information you're sharing with us in this meeting, the one on Saturday and the last week, we'll be combining that information into a report, as well as case studies that will be looking at how other counties have handled regulation and policy related to data center development, while also integrating best practices, emerging innovation, and other design expertise that we're able to bring to the conversation. So all of that will be part of a report that we'll share back in September to the task force. As James mentioned, for those that may want to take pictures of this, hopefully that's, again, easy to read, but this is the second of the 3 meetings that we have planned. As mentioned, the third will be at the Southern Regional Technical and Recreation Complex in Fort Washington this Saturday at 10 a.m. So we have a team here today to help facilitate and lead these conversations at your tables. So really the bulk of our conversation is really going to be at the tables. So I introduced myself, Elaine. I'm a strategy director and public engagement lead at Gensler. And with me are a handful of my Gensler team raise their hands. You'll meet them all at your tables. Evan, Tyler, Simi, Chris, Jenna, and James will be hosting one of our tables today. So each of us will have an opportunity to chat with you in the breakouts. So 3 goals we have for today. First is to explore benefits and potential impact around data center development. Second, to understand your concerns. And third, gather any opinions or considerations that could inform future planning and policy recommendations. We're not trying to propose new development today. Kind of, as James was mentioning, it's really about collecting input that can help us identify community benefits and priorities that can inform future planning policies. And while the policy today currently allows data centers to be developed in Prince George's County, it is in accordance with legal requirements. And the intent of these workshops is to gather feedback that could help us develop potential policies as we move forward. So we wanted to kick off with an overview on data centers, what they are, what's driving their growth, some topics of interest, and site considerations. So first, it helps to establish what is a data center. So data centers are buildings that house the infrastructure that supports the world's computing functions. They're processing and storing data in things that we may know as the cloud. Their primary function is processing and accessing data, but they also store data and safeguard that data in environments that help to protect from hackers and intrusion. So it's increasingly something, data centers are something that are increasingly powering our everyday digital activities. Whether that's email, streaming, gaming, in addition to managing our healthcare records, financial systems, and of course, AI is certainly a big topic of conversation right now, where that's sort of impacting many of our processes systems, and we're just seeing it everywhere. So data centers impact all of us. It impacts residents, businesses, education, healthcare, our government and financial institutions, in addition to the impacts it may have on the environment. So we want to unpack a little further what's driving the growth of data centers. Certainly post-pandemic, there's been a significant increase in digital activity, especially in the last 18 months, relative to kind of how AI has been integrated into so many things so quickly in our daily lives. So much of our experiences, whether it's at work or at home, is connected to the cloud. So this is something that we're just seeing continuing to increase. So in addition to that rapid growth in digital activity, we also recognize that our local and national infrastructure is supported by data centers. They enable reliable connectivity for businesses, for schools, for government functions. They really serve as the backbone for sectors like healthcare, finance, logistics, and research. So it's a very ubiquitous sort of infrastructure that is more and more part of our lives. So why is this important right now? Data centers are drawing increased news coverage and certainly public scrutiny, which is part of why meetings like this are so important. Communities are voicing concerns about land use, sustainability, equity, opportunity, and there are competing views on some of these benefits versus maybe some of those environmental and social impacts. So we wanted to talk through and kind of unpack some of those possible topics of interest. So we'll focus on these 6 today. Economic development, tax revenue, local digital connectivity, digital infrastructure, community and civic benefits, and potential for sustainability. So for economic development, jobs always come up in these conversations, certainly, and there are high-paying jobs in the construction of these facilities. And while there may be a smaller number of jobs that may be happening, in the longer term operation and maintenance, it does bring significant opportunity for tradespeople, whether it's in that building ongoing maintenance or operations. We heard in our last meeting there's a gentleman from, I think the electrician trade union, and he was really able to speak to some of the impact on his colleagues and on his folks on how they're able to how they would benefit from more opportunities locally versus always driving out to other counties where these are developed. So it's interesting to sort of hear some of those personal stories. I think from the task force there was another presentation on this topic. So again, interesting to hear about. And we want to think about ultimately how these can support, again, those skill building opportunities, as well as in terms of direct jobs, as well as indirect economic opportunity for these facilities. In terms of digital connectivity, oh, sorry, tax revenue. Let me go back to tax revenue. I want to talk through that for sure. So one of the things relative to tax revenue, again, this is a huge thing that continually comes up. You know, I think there's a couple of things here that there's opportunities for that local tax revenue to be generated both for real or personal property tax. We've seen in other counties some tax burdens be reduced for residents. In Loudoun County, they saw their residential property taxes decrease by over 1/3 in the last decade as a result of revenue derived from data center development. And while we understand Prince George is a different context, as James was saying, how people develop in Northern Virginia is different than what's happening in Maryland. We think it's interesting in terms of how it illustrates, you know, what could be possible in terms of relieving tax burden and or contributing to community infrastructure investment that could add value back to community and residents. So while there are some trade-offs, there are some things to consider in terms of potential opportunity. Relative to digital infrastructure and connectivity, again, one of the things that's been interesting as data centers come into the environment, it's really helping to increase whether it's access to local high-speed internet cloud services. It does make it more appealing for tech-driven businesses to come into the community. It's certainly helping to power essential services. And I think there's just sort of kind of a broader participation in how this infrastructure connects across counties and across states. One of the ways that we've certainly seen a lot of meaningful impact has also been around community benefits. And you know, we'll talk. There's a table that'll be focused specifically on that. And we have another slide that digs into this a bit further. But again, what are the community benefits that go beyond the boundary of the facility? How are we thinking about it relative to, you know, this is mentioning infrastructure benefits, but also there could be other kinds of programming and opportunities that can benefit communities. So whether that's in terms of education, job pipelines, workforce development opportunities, there's a number of things that we can look at and consider. So we'll have a deeper conversation there. And then potential for sustainability. There is a kind of interesting conversation around renewable energy. How are we upgrading our grid opportunities for grid modernization, and thinking about infrastructure demands like recycled water systems. So some things that can come along with improving overall county infrastructure relative to sustainability. So one of the things that's, again, interesting to look at are what have other counties created guidelines around. So again, some of these things you'll see consistently coming up in this conversation. One is around water demand and water quality. That's certainly something that we've seen other counties create guidelines or requirements around. Land use and site design, we have a table that'll be talking a little bit about that. Energy demand and efficiency, building design, noise mitigation often comes up, and monitoring, air quality monitoring, and then again, community benefits as a category. So all of these things we've seen as we've started to look at what other counties are doing relative to setting up regulation and guidelines. These are all categories of things that we've seen and identified. I'll just also offer the presentation will be available online, and we do have printed copies, so for those taking photos, go forward, but we do have stuff that we can give you in addition, so just so you know. In terms of types of data centers, yeah, we can keep going. I think it's also really important to kind of understand that there's a range. They're not all one size. So to kind of look at it as a scale, we put some square footages to kind of give a little bit of points of reference. But we have everything from edge, which are sort of smaller installations that could be as small as a room, to more hyperscale, which are the larger campuses. So we kind of have we can go into that in a little bit more detail, but I think I'm handing it over to Vanessa for just a moment.
We're very fortunate to have Chairman Barnes come into the room, and I want him to say a few words about his vision for data centers.
How's everybody doing? Good. I won't be before you guys long. I just wanted to come in and say hello. I know some of you guys in the room. I used to represent this area as a state delegate, but now I'm in this position as the new chairman of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning. So I just wanted to come and say that I'm excited, but more importantly, I'm more excited that you guys are here, that you guys are getting involved in the community and trying to understand the logic and the reason and why we're trying to do data centers here in the county, and why we need you guys' input and what we're doing and how we're doing it. because at the end of the day, we want it to make sense. Some things that we're looking at, we need your input. We need that honest input about what we're doing and how we're doing it, and where we're thinking about putting these data centers. So I would ask you not to be shy. Raise your hand and ask as many questions as you possibly can. Get involved in some of the work things that we're doing here. But I think it's important that if you do not get involved in answering questions and providing your feedback, then I think you're doing yourselves and the community a disservice. Because what we are trying to do is go around the county and talk to as many people as we possibly can, to let them know what we're doing here in Maryland Park and Planning. I have one of the best assistant deputy directors in James Hunt, who is here that will answer any and all questions. He lives for this stuff. Right? Ask him how they're subdivided, division, and the square footage or something, he can break it down to you in 2 seconds. And we have the newly hired assistant deputy director, Gwen McCall, who's also here. Listen, we're here for you, and we need you guys to be here for us. So once again, get involved, look at some of the things that we're saying. Our consultants are knowledgeable, they're aware of what's happening, and we're here to answer any questions that you guys may have. Thank you guys so much.
All right, we'll march on through. So relative to types of data centers, we can go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, on the left side, we have the edge data center, which is sort of more compact. Maybe that's in the 5,000 to 10,000 square foot range. You may not even notice it's there. It's a room. Often these are used in a situation where people are maybe trying to increase streaming speeds, or a network provider is trying to increase speed or latency for end users. So these are kind of on the smallest end. The next over, enterprise or corporate, this is maybe in that 10,000 to 50,000 square foot range. These are often owned and operated by a single organization. So think about a university or a large corporate campus. Then they need to have a data center to support their own needs. This could be something that they might build on their own campus in a dedicated facility or a dedicated offsite facility. The two kind of larger examples, the co-location or wholesale, this is that 50,000 to 350,000 square foot, maybe 1 to 10 acres. This is maybe a single building. These are maybe more common or more commonly seen, or what we may commonly think about. And these can offer, there's different versions of these, but it could be something where one client has sort of taken the whole thing, or this is more subdivided and multiple clients have parts in it. But these are usually developer driven, or could be from a single owner. Hyperscale is the campus version, so it's taking that building and multiplying it around a campus. So that's where you start to see the larger acreage, 10 plus acres and 350,000 square feet. Those are known as hyperscales.
Which ones are used by municipalities, like Prince George's County?
I don't know that I can answer the question. I imagine, do you know the answer to that?
I don't have the answer to that right now because I'm not aware of any here in the county, but I want to kind of let her kind of go through the presentation real quick and we'll kind of circle back around if you don't mind. There'll be room for that a little bit later, Dan.
For what it's worth, on the co-location, if we can go back one, on the co-location, that's sort of set up where if whatever your needs are, like an entity might buy a few racks or rent a few racks within a building that they're using. So it could be that kind of circumstance, but depending on need, it would be a larger or smaller footprint. So if we go to site considerations, there's 5 key considerations when looking at data centers. And so we'll talk through the 5 of these as they each have sort of different things to think about. So first, power usage. So data centers are extremely power intensive. We talk a lot about power when we talk about data centers. They require stable and substantial power supply to operate the servers and the cooling systems around the clock, 24/7. And this need can sometimes restrict where they're able to locate. They need that access to power. The good news is that the industry is shifting towards as much energy efficiency as possible. So we're seeing improvements in server technology, we're seeing more efficient cooling, and we're seeing use of renewable energy providers. And I think there's been a increasing investment in on-site power generation, which can help ease the strain on local power grids. So we're seeing, as the sort of demand is increasing, that for people to develop, they need to come with their own power. So that's been an interesting evolution that we're seeing more and more solutions around. Water is another major consideration. Many data centers use water for cooling systems, which means they often require more water than maybe a typical industrial facility. And that can place pressure on local municipal supplies. However, the industry is adapting. So we are seeing technologies like closed loop systems, air-cooled systems that do help reduce water usage. A lot of facilities are trying to use reclaimed or non-potable water. That might reduce reliance on municipal systems, but it does require that the county has enough of that non-potable water to use. So I think there's this relationship between local government and the considerations they need to have to be able to provide some of those things. So there's a back and forth that we have to consider. Relative to land use, again, there's that range. We saw from everything from a room to a large campus. So they can take up a fair amount of space. They need room for the building itself, plus equipment like backup generators and cooling units. But again, we are seeing improvements relative to more efficient and compact designs. We're also seeing a push and interest in building on land that's already been developed or to start like old industrial sites, so that we're not taking up undeveloped natural areas unnecessarily. So, prioritizing brownfields over greenfields. So again, that's one of the things that we see and we think is an interesting prioritization that's been meaningful. And then finally, roads and access. We have one more left. So access is key. Data centers need reliable roads for construction, equipment delivery, and long-term operation. And having access to nearby highways and logistic routes help to reduce traffic problems and help the project run more smoothly. Fortunately, a lot of the projects today are planned near existing infrastructure that minimizes the need for major new road development. And then finally, fiber. Data centers need fast and reliable internet, specifically fiber optic cables. This is how they're able to move large amounts of data from users to businesses to other data centers around the world. And the fiber network in many areas is improving as a result of these kinds of developments, which makes it easier for data centers to connect. That's also benefiting local businesses and homes because better fiber infrastructure can mean faster internet and more tech opportunities for the community. Of the 5 considerations that we just talked through, power is definitely the biggest driver today, but all of these things are continuing to change as we've seen different technologies advancing and the sort of context shifting. As you mentioned earlier, community building and guidelines around community benefits is something that we're also seeing more of. And we're seeing more interest from developers, data center developers wanting to be better neighbors and to contribute to the communities that they're part of. So some of the categories that we might see are around environmental sustainability, local hiring and contracting, economic growth, investing in community infrastructure, and then community support and integration. So a couple of examples, like a vocational program could be supported at a local community college. An incubator program for small businesses could be engaged in the construction of the building and maybe long-term operation. We've also seen a circumstance where an operator might, again, invest in broadband infrastructure or other infrastructure that both supports their facility as well as surrounding communities. So there are some interesting things that you can find some mutually beneficial relationships relative to the investments they're making and how it might benefit neighbors in surrounding community areas. So what we wanted to do today with all of that as sort of our context is have some table discussions. And the way that we've set this up, you'll notice that there's tables that have a 1, 2, and 3 on them. And we have some key kind of questions that are related to each of those tables. So what we'll do is have a series of 3 rounds. So everybody will have the opportunity to talk about all 3 of these topics. So to just sort of walk you through the topics and how that'll work, the first is this community benefits. Well, everyone will have a sort of different starting one. So the first one here, community benefits opportunities. That's the table where we'll talk most about workforce development, some of these tax revenue opportunities, local partnerships, infrastructure investments. The category, the second one, common concerns and mitigation strategies. That's where we're gonna talk about noise, energy use, water consumptions, maybe potential public costs. Those are the sorts of things that we may wanna cover there. Third, site considerations in building design. We'll be looking at factors that influence whether it's site selection or facility design. So site access and location, architectural design and screening, sustainable strategies, and environmental performance. So the way that this will work is, as James mentioned, the facilitators are gonna rotate so you don't have to. So you'll see that we have these tables, there's kind of 6 tables that have stuff on them. So if you're at a table without stuff, we want you to find a table with stuff. So these folks kind of in this row and this row, you can choose whichever one you want to go to. Yes?
I just wanted to be a little bit clearer in terms of the approval process. I mean, I think it's great, we want to be part of the discussion. But where are we actually in terms of the approval process? You said it was approved, had gone through the planning board. Lance started asking questions about the design of the facility. I mean, what has been discussed in terms of the actual design?
So I guess there are multiple questions kind of coming on. So the lady was just a few moments ago just asking about what is the status of the process, right? Where everything is in the process. So to kind of clarify here, when it comes to the actual policy of data centers right now, there's an approval process already in place. What that looks like right now is for if the zone that the property is located in, under the zoning ordinance, if it does allow for a data center to go on that property, that site itself, in accordance with the overall plan for Prince George's County, then they have to go through one public hearing process, which is the preliminary plan of subdivision, okay? That preliminary plan of subdivision process allows for the public to come out and speak and provide their input on that location and related to, let's say, adequacy when it comes to the infrastructure improvements that are necessary for that location. So that's one thing. Now, if you're talking about a specific project itself, I'll need to know as far as specifically, like I was talking about earlier, we're talking the Landover Mall site, for example, they've already gone through that preliminary plan of subdivision process. That when they receive that approval from the planning board, what typically happens is under the law, they're allowed, I think, up to 3 years in order to what we call vest that approval to take place. And from my understanding, they're coming up to the end of that approval, that validity period. So, and they have not done any work. So if they have not done any work by that time period, they have to start the process all over again, okay? So where we are, that's kind of where we are with that site itself. Now, and the process is pretty much about the same throughout Prince George's County for right now. But we're here today to talk about how you all want the process to be. Okay, we're going to talk about that. We're talking about the site design. We're talking about the environmental impacts. We're talking about community benefits. What do you want to see as a community? Just like Elaine was talking about earlier, it's not just about roadway improvements. We're also talking about, do you want them to give back to the community, to the schools? What way do you want them to give back to you? Because there may be potential impacts to the community. So what does that look like to you? You've got the key. We want to hear from you. That's the point right now. We want to hear from you what you want to see. This is your moment to shine. So we want to hear from you as Prince George's residents what you want to see when it comes to this data center process, okay? If you want to continue to allow them to go through the public hearing process, say that, okay? If you want them to come back and say, I want you to provide X amount of dollars when it comes to schools, say that. If you want them to provide a school, say that. If you want them to, what type of impacts to stormwater management, if you want to do something specific to that, say that as a part of this process. Write on that sticky note. You got sticky notes right in front of you. Write that down. Whatever you want, write that down. That's what this team is here for. They're taking that information from you, and they're going to pass that along to the task force members, which after that, it goes straight up to the council. Okay? So that's what we're here for today. We want to get you back where we need to be. We need to hear from you what you want as a part of this process.
Great, thank you. So as we said, so to kind of move us through, there's some questions that each of your facilitators will actually ask our facilitators to kind of go to the tables. So I think we have Chris, or I don't know.
You
Chris.
have another question to that.
Okay. Is it related to the facilitation or is it following on to what James was just saying?
I understand that this is the process. Thank you. This is the process that's in place. Once a city or area decides that it does not want the data center, will the county planning department override them? Will the county override them? If the majority of people in the area say no, even as we go through this process?
So to kind of clarify here, on the planning side, we have the elected officials are the one who make the decisions on this. So that's a public hearing process, so that's in place. So again, today, what we want to hear from you, if you want the process to go a certain way, then we want to know from you what that is. So if you want them to say or do a certain thing, you need to write that down so we can provide that feedback to them. The way it stands right now, like I said, it goes to a public hearing process before the planning board, and then it gets approved. Now, if you want a detailed site plan or another process, such as there's another process called a special exception process, where it would go to the council for another level of review. That's another thing. You have a tool in your toolbox you can use and kind of write that down. We'll take that to them as well. So it's not an easy thing as you all may not want them to do, may or may not want them to do. So it's that's the tools in your toolbox, and that's what I'm kind of here for, to kind of make sure you're aware of what those tools are, so you can write that down and we can provide that feedback. Okay. Real quick, what I'll do, if you don't mind, I apologize. I want to kind of keep us on task so we can get everybody out here on time. I'm going to come around. You'll have a chance. I'm going to be at one of the tables. Please feel free to ask me whatever questions that you have so I can answer those questions. But I want to be mindful and respectful of everyone's time here. I don't care what question is about data centers. I'm here to answer it. Okay. Whatever I know, I'm going to answer. If I don't know it, I'm going to tell you I don't know, but I'm going to get back to you. Okay. So that said, I'm going to kind of turn it back over to Elaine so we can kind of stay on task here.
Great, thank you, James. All right, so if you're at a table, as I mentioned, that doesn't have stuff on it, I encourage you to join one of the adjoining tables. We'll have our table hosts. So I believe Evan is here. Jenna will be at the back table there. Tyler is here. Stimmy behind. Chris is here. James, you're in the back there. So what we'll do is we'll have about 20 minutes for each round, and then we'll kind of call a switch. As I said, you've got some questions in front of you that sort of outline for the matching. We've got a 2 and a 2, so you can kind of know what questions we're talking about in each category. And then each of our facilitators will take notes as much as they can. We encourage you to write Post-its and put them yourself as well. It's an all hands on deck effort. So thank you all, and we'll let you know when you have about a 5-minute warning to switch topics. So if I can get everybody's attention back to the front of the room, a couple of announcements to close us out.
Keep going.
You can. All right, so I'm just going to close this up real quick. Please feel free to continue chatting at your tables if you'd like to stay, but we want to make sure and be respectful of people's times if they need to leave. As we mentioned earlier, we have the task force meetings that are upcoming, so September 10th, October 8th, and November 12th. Those are at 11 a.m. at 1616 McCormick Drive in Largo. We encourage you all, this has been a first conversation. We encourage you to participate in these meetings, whether you're watching them online or you're attending in person. Very informative. And at the September meeting, we'll be sharing some initial findings from this, and then the draft report will be released November 2025. So this coming year in November. At the November 12th meeting. So again, there's some ongoing conversations that this will be reflected back in. In addition, again, we really appreciate everyone's time. It's always a lot to ask on a school night to have a couple hours, but we really appreciate everyone's attendance. The website I mentioned, the QR code again, as was up earlier. If you have questions, comments, please feel free to email at datacenters@ppd.mncppc.org. And we really look forward to continuing this conversation. We do have the meeting again on Saturday. If you've had a great time tonight, we encourage you to come again tomorrow, Saturday, not tomorrow, one more day. Tell your friends, share it with your neighbors, share it with organizations you may be part of. We're looking forward to a great turnout and again, building on the things that you all have shared today. Any closing comments, James? Good. All right, well, thank you all so much. Thank you to the facilitators. Thank you for your participation. And have a wonderful